Thank you for joining us in this webinar about the Dominican Republic and the investment opportunities that this country can offer to you. My name is Jorge Cascos. I'm Senior Vice President of Casa de Campo Real Estate. I'm a lawyer with an MBA degree. You haven't been in the country, in Dominican Republic. You probably hear about his incredible beaches and rivers, the hospitality of the people, and the Dominican food. Dominican food with their mofongos, sancochos, habichuelas, etc. And only you probably hear about their tasteful and magnificent rooms. You have been here before. I'm sure you are planning to come back very soon. This is a country to fall in love with, and this is what happened to me 5 years ago when I moved from Spain with my 12-year-old son. If living in Dominican Republic is great, living in Casa de Campo is a fantastic experience and is a privilege for conocer. Campo is the most exclusive resort in the Caribbean, has more than 5,600 acres and more than 50 years of glamorous existence. Privacy, security, and higher standards of services are essential for us. Among his 4 golf courses, Tip of the Dog is famous worldwide and is ranked in the 20 top in the world. In addition to the 4 golf courses, all of Pitedai, we have a shooting camp. We have 13 golf courses. 13 tennis courts. Our own marina with 370 moorings, a equestrian center, 3 polo fields, and something that makes Casa de Campo unique and very special. It's a national monument, Altos de Chavon. Altos de Chavon is a medieval Mediterranean village built in the 20th century. Inside Altos de Chavon, you will find his famous amphitheater with 50,000 seats. In this scenario, very well-known artists as Frank Sinatra, Julio Iglesias, and recently Rod Stewart has performed. In La Marina and in Altos de Chavon is concentrated most of the shops and restaurants. We have 14 restaurants of international cuisine, from Italian to Peruvian, from Spanish to Japanese food. All of them offers you very interesting gastronomic experiences. The owners of Casa de Campo know that they have made a very safe and profitable investment because it's a consolidated resort with a solid growing trajectory and has the financial support of Central Romana Corporation, who is upgrading and maintaining the infrastructures, the hospital, the hotel, a very 5-star luxury hotel, and the very prestigious bilingual Abraham Lincoln School. Casa de Campo Real Estate, which I proudly say in this session, is a team of professionals who are willing to help you to take the right decision at the time of buying or renting a property in Casa de Campo. The sale of properties and land lots has grown extremely in the last years in an amount unthinkable before the pandemic. By far, we are the largest seller of properties in Casa de Campo. In 2022, we sold 94 villas, 9 condos, and 45 land lots. Our main competitor in the same period only sold 20 villas, 4 condos, and 14 plots. So 1/4 of the number of properties we sold in 2022. As a lawyer and as a professional who has been involved in the financial sector for years, I really know the importance of obtaining the information about the country in which you plan to invest. Aspects such social and political stability, economic situation, and medium-term prospects, exchange rate, the legal and tax framework are essential to know before to take any investment decision abroad. And those are the topics that I want to cover with you today: social and political framework, macroeconomic framework with GDP and inflation, debt, monetary policy, tourist sector that is extremely important for this country, and tax incentives for foreign investors. Please, if you have any question, I will be very happy to answer them at the end of my intervention. So let's talk about the social political framework. Dominican Republic is a consolidated democracy. It's one of the most stable democracies in the Latin American and Caribbean countries. From 2004 until 2020, the PLD, Partido de Liberación Dominicana, has ruled the country. The PLD has a conservative ideology, has applied very conservative and traditional economic policies. In 2020, in August 2020, the Partido Revolucionario Moderno won the elections, and Luis Abinader took power. Luis Abinader has a very successful trade record as a businessman. He surrounded himself by a team of very well-trained economic team, and they have plans to modernize the country. Luis Abinader is carrying out a policy of purging responsibility for the previous government and confronting the prevailing corruptions. If you look at most of the country in the Latin American and Caribbean countries, you will find governments with populist and left-wing policies that worry and scare away the investors. Countries as Chile, as Colombia, as Venezuela, as Mexico, all those have led in populist governments. So let's go through the key performance indicators of the Dominican economy. It's very important when you analyze an economy to put in context and compare with the others to see how performance this economy. So talking about the GDP, it's very important to highlight the 5 years prior to the pandemic, the average GDP growth rate in Dominican Republic was 6.1% according to the World Bank. And this is the fastest growing country in Latin America and Caribbean region. In 2020, because of the pandemic, the GDP of Dominican Republic contracts by 6.7%. In the same period, the economy of the Latin American Caribbean countries, LAC, contracts by 7%. This happened in all the economies across the world. So this is not a particular phenomenon of the Latin American Caribbean countries. In 2022, the Dominican Republic returns to growth at the path of 12.3%. In 2022, we closed with a growth of 4.9%, and the World Bank expects the Dominican Republic economy to grow by 4.4%. If you compare with other countries in the Latin American Caribbean region, you see that in some cases the growth path of Dominican Republic double the average of the others. If we also go through the GDP per capita, we saw how the Dominican Republic has been performing better than the countries of the LAC area region. The GDP per capita in Dominican Republic has been growing and narrowing the gap between his economy and the economies of the Latin American Caribbean countries. You see the graphic, and you see from 1961 to 2019. And it's almost the same GDP per capita in Dominican Republic than the average in the Latin American Caribbean region countries. If you see also in this graphic, the line, the orange line that represents the GDP of the Dominican Republic, you will see the performance much better than the black line that represents the economies of the Latin region. So what are the key sectors in the Dominican Republic? The key sectors are tourists that represents 15% of the GDP, foreign direct investments, mining revenues, free trade zones in which the industries of pharmaceutical industry, textile industry, and cigars are very important, and telecommunication. All these sectors are pushing and booming the economy of the Dominican Republic and convert the economy in one of the fastest growing economies in the Latin American Caribbean countries. So now let's talk about the public debt and his relation on GDP. The public debt in all the countries across the world has suffered and has been increased because of the COVID. In 2022, the public debt of Dominican Republic was $44,624 million US, and the ratio between public debt and GDP was 56.6. In 2022, the public debt grew up to $51,854 million US, and the ratio against GDP was 45.9. As mentioned before, it's very important to put in context those numbers. If you compare how was the ratio of public debt against GDP in Dominican Republic with, for example, US, you will be surprised. The ratio of public debt on GDP in US is 764%. 764%, and Dominican Republic has 45.9. If we compare with the European Union public debt on GDP is 91%, and in Dominican Republic is 45.9%. So this is a country that has not a big amount of debt. So let's talk about the next key indicator, key performance indicator. That's inflation rate. As everybody knows, inflation is now the main concern of all the central banks across the world. After the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, the inflation rate is really growing at a very fast percentage. In 2020, the inflation rate of the Dominican Republic was 3.8, up to 8.24 in 2021, down to 7.83, and in 2023, the World Bank expects that the Dominican Republic will close the year with 4.5 inflation rate. Comparing with the orange bars, you see that the inflation rate in the Dominican Republic in 2022 is close to half, and this coming year will perform much better than the rest of the countries in the Latac area. It's very important to highlight that all the data related to Latin American and Caribbean countries doesn't include the data from Argentinian economy, in which inflation rate currently is over 100. So the monetary policy. The monetary policy most important tool is interest rate. Interest rate is one tool that could boom in the economy or could cool the economy, depending on the financial environment worldwide. Interest rates in all the countries started to grow after the pandemic to try to cool the economy and control the inflation rate. So the interest rate in the country has been extremely high until 2006. Before that, the country had 2 digits inflation rate. From 2007 until 2019, the inflation rate remains over 5%. In 2019, the central bank started to decrease the interest rate to try to push the economy. This process finishes in 2020, in which the interest rate goes down to 3%, the lowest rate in this country since last century. In 2022, December, the movement of increased interest rate started in the country and has continued increasing until November of 2022, in which he reached 8.5%, and in May of this year remain at the same level. But it's the same monetary policy that has been followed for most of the central bank, most of all the central banks over the world. So let's talk about the exchange rate. Exchange rate is very important for foreign investors. Before to provide information about that is in the screen, it's very important to highlight that all the transactions in Casa de Campo are made in US dollars. So making the transaction US dollars avoids exchange rate risk. The US dollar against Dominican peso was 49.3 in 2018. The US dollar has been a strength, his exchange rate against the Dominican peso during the last 3 years, going up to 56.93 a spot during the year. In 2022, the peso started to take strength, and the rate was 54.76 average US dollar per peso during the year. In May 2023, the peso continued strength, and now the exchange rate is 54 pesos per US dollar. So let's talk about the tourists. The tourists, is, as I mentioned before, represent 15% of the GDP of the Dominican Republic. The main tourist area are the East Coast, in which Bávaro Punta Cana is located, and Valladolid La Romana is also located, with Casa de Campo in La Romana province. So Bávaro Punta Cana represents more than half of the tourists received every year. So this area receives more than 3 million tourists every year. Other areas of interest are Santo Domingo, Samaná, and Puerto Plata. The tourists, construction, and unemployment. To give you an example, the number of new building permits grew 24% in 2022 against 2021. The number of tourists, as you see on the graphic, has been continually increasing, excluding the time of the pandemic. So we achieved a record of 6,569,000 in 2018, more or less the same number in 2018, before the year before the pandemic, goes down to 3 million in 2020, and in 2021 start to grow and achieve the number of 5 million, and in 2022 the country beat the record of tourists with 7,200,000 received. You see the graphic, in 2 years we passed from 3 million to 7,200,000. That is more than double the number of tourists received. What is happening in 2023? In the first quarter, we see the same tendency. The number of tourists received in the first quarter in this year is 3,100,000. In the number, in the same period in 2022 was 2,200,026. So in a year, the number of tourists received in the first quarter grew 39.13%. 39.13% is a huge number. And if we continue at the same path during the rest of the year, we will arrive to the number of 9 million or around 9 million. And that 9 million is a big, big achievement for industry and for the country, who has 11 million people. So what are the countries of origin? So this first 2 months of the year, we observe a new country comer in the top 5. Mexicans represent 26.32% in the first 2 months. US goes to the second place with 21.61%. Canada represents 19.09% of the tourists. Europe represents 15.03%. If we achieve the number of 9 million, so that means that 1,800,000 US citizens will visit this country. Let's talk about the KPIs of the tourist industry. Average spending is $139 in 2022. Average stay is 8.57 days. That is a big number too. Hotel occupancy, this is the main indicator for the tourist industry and the hotel industry. January is a mistake here. January 22 is 78.9%, the average in the country. But in concrete Bávaro Punta Cana area is 84.9%. 84.5%. 84.5%. I need to remark the number because it's a big number. In February 2023, the average occupancy in the country was 80.9, but in Bávaro Punta Cana, again, performed better with 84.8%. Again, we need to put in context this number. If we look at Spain, it's the second largest, has the second largest tourist industry in the world, receiving more than 80 million people each year. The occupancy rate during 2022 achieved the percentage of 75.4% in the month of August. Is the bigger percentage achieved during 2022 in Spain, the second largest tourist industry. So is 900 basis points more in Dominican Republic than in Spain. So that gives you an idea about how is this country performing. So now is the turn to talk about taxes. It's a topic that everybody wants to avoid, but I need to talk about that. There is a legal framework that current foreign investments in the country in different sectors, including the tourist. The law who fix those incentives is the law 1695, law 16 from 1995. And it's important to highlight that since then, no government approval is required for repatriation of profits. Talking about pensioners and rentiers, the law 17107 are stimulating the investment, granting them facilities to obtain residency, and at the same time, the pensioners and rentiers are granted for exemptions or reductions in taxes as real estate tax, capital gains, and transfer tax. Canada and Spain have signed treaties with Dominican Republic government to avoid double taxation. So those countries have special tax advantages for their citizens. Talking now about taxes related to real estate investment, we have 4 taxes that must be considered. The first one is the real estate tax. It's a yearly tax, it's 1% over the property value. And it's paid in 2 installments, 15% in March and 15% in September. So it's 1%. Transfer tax is 3%. It's a buyer side tax, and it's paid when you close a deal of buying a property. Capital gains is 25%. Capital gains, as you know, is the difference between acquisition cost and selling price. Well, the good news for that, to calculate that tax, is the inflation adjustments are allowed. So if you bought 10 years ago, you can adjust by inflation the 10 years you have been detaining the property. Inheritance of properties by non-Dominicans. Dominican law allows foreigners to have their national law determine the rules of inheritance. So we have 1% property tax, 3% buyer side transfer tax, and capital gains of 25%. Those are the taxes that you need to consider before to make any investments in the country. So let's summarize all the topics that we covered during the presentation. So Dominican Republic has a stable government and conservative policies, a growing economy, and a very high path. the public debt under control, a fairly stable currency, to highlight that all the transactions are made in US dollar, tourists breaking records every year, low taxation, and tax incentives for foreign investors. All these factors encourage the flow of capital from Latin American countries and Spain to invest in Dominican Republic. If you wish to receive more information about properties in Casa de Campo, we will happy to help you to find the most convenient and most appropriate investment decisions with great potential of revaluation. So don't miss the opportunity to visit this country, either to invest or either to be on vacation, or both at the same time. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And if you have any question, we will be happy to answer. In this video, you have all the details of our email and phone contact. This is the video of Casa de Campo resort. You could visit all the areas, the ranch, beach, Altos de Chabón, where we commented before, the medieval village. Here are all the contact details and where you could reach us. Thank you very much again.